Ahora damos paso a una interesante mesa de análisis con la presencia de Jeremi Suri, profesor en Historia por la Universidad de Yale y de Ohio, especialista en áreas de investigación en estrategia, liderazgo, toma de decisiones, relaciones internacionales, seguridad nacional, globalización y asuntos internacionales. Tiene la cátedra distinguida Mac Brown para el liderazgo en asuntos globales en la Universidad de Texas en Austin. En 2007 fue nombrado uno de los Top Young Innovators de Estados Unidos en artes y ciencias. En 2018 recibió el premio Pro Benemeritis por contribuciones a las artes liberales. También recibió premio a la experiencia docente de los asociados presidenciales de la Universidad de Texas. Y Sergio Gómez Lora, integrante del equipo de negociaciones comerciales de México de 1993 a 2001. Participó en las negociaciones de los acuerdos laterales del TLCAN, del TLCAN, y el Tratado de Libre Comercio México-Unión Europea. Cofundador de IQOM, Inteligencia Comercial, brindando soluciones estratégicas de comercio e inversión a empresas nacionales y transnacionales. Es miembro activo del cuarto de junto del TLCAN y ha liderado la asesoría del sector privado mexicano con la estrategia de negociación y el esfuerzo de cabildeo. Encabeza la oficina del CCE en Estados Unidos, así como la oficina de Index USA. Bien, pues les escuchamos. Ustedes tienen la palabra.
Muchísimas gracias y muchísimas gracias a Humberto por la oportunidad de estar aquí. Thank you so much, Jeremy, for being with us today. We will speak in English, but I understand there will be simultaneous translation in the screen. So we will go right to the point because Jeremy has to take a flight to Miami in a few minutes. So we want to understand what's going in the elections, and be ready, Jeremy. I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to put some pressure on you to tell us who's going to win.
Okay.
But
okay.
Before that, let's talk about what happened in the election. Like, you know, 2 months ago, Donald Trump was basically the winner. Biden was losing ground in polls. Trump had survived an assassination attempt, and he had a successful convention. Rumors circulated about Biden stepping down, but people in Washington thought that Kamala Harris was a weak candidate. What happened, Jeremy? What happened? What factors have driven this favorable change for Democrats? And why has Trump campaign been so slow to adjust to Harris?
Thank you for your question. I am very happy to be here. I particularly enjoyed the conchinita last night. It was delicious. My wife was very jealous. She was not here. And I want to thank my friend Sergio for being on stage here with me. I think you are correct that about 6 weeks, 2 months ago, we thought the election was going in the other direction, that Donald Trump had the advantages, especially after a debate where Joe Biden performed very badly. But everything changed when Biden left the race, because what happened was, for Americans, Biden leaving the race gave a new choice. Most Americans who were unhappy with the election, whether they liked Trump or Biden, were unhappy because we had 2 old candidates, 2 of the candidates from before. What Americans are thinking now is that we need new leadership. And even though Kamala Harris has been vice president for 4 years, she has not been president. And so she represents something new to many Americans. In addition to that, she is someone who is exciting for many important constituencies, many important parts of the American electorate, which includes minority voters, women, those living in big cities. She has engaged them in a way they were not engaged before. I will give you an example. My students 3-4 months ago were not very excited about the election. Many of them were not going to vote. Now many of them are excited for Kamala Harris. even more important, they are volunteering. They are going and knocking on doors. They are calling people about the election. So I think the candidates changed things. And then one other big change that's very important is that we were dealing with high inflation in the United States, and inflation has begun to come down. And you saw yesterday the Federal Reserve cut interest rates by 1/2 of a percentage point. The stock market, I was looking today, is doing very well. The economic conditions are feeling better for many Americans. Many are still anxious, but we know that how people feel when they go to vote about the economy is very important, and this has become an advantage for Kamala Harris now.
Okay, Jeremy, so we understand now what happened. So now we want to talk what is going to happen. We are 45 days away from the election. We're basically in a technical tie. So please explain us, Jeremy, what are the key elements that would determine the winner of this election? And, you know, it is known that a few states, called the swing states, will decide this election. Please explain us why this is the case.
Excellent question. So there are two separate points here. The first point that is true for the United States, I don't know if it's true for Mexico. In the United States, very few people change their minds. It is an irony of American elections. We spend millions, billions of dollars, but most people vote at the end of the election the way they plan to vote at the start of the election. Democrats stay Democrats, Republicans stay Republicans. There are very few independent voters. I almost never meet an independent voter. One of the keys to winning the election is turnout, getting your people to vote, making them more enthusiastic. In the United States, about 60% of the people vote. If you can get 65 or 70% of your allies to vote, you have a big advantage. So it's about turnout, it's about making people enthusiastic. This has been an advantage for Harris. Now, the swing states are a crucial part of the election, and it's very important to understand in the United States, unlike in Mexico, we do not have one election. We actually have more than 50 elections for every state, and then also for Washington, D.C. as well. Each state has its own election, and if you win the state, even by one vote, you get all of the electoral votes, and you need 270 total. There are a few states, 7, maybe 8, where it can go either way. In California, Harris will definitely win. The Democrats are much stronger. In Texas, where I am, the Republicans will probably win. But there are states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, that are very close. And so those are the so-called swing states. And the way you win in those states is getting more of your people to come out to vote. Pennsylvania might be the most important one of them. That is why you see Harris and Trump going to Pennsylvania all the time and not going to Texas or California. It makes no sense. Texas and California are so much bigger. But they go to the places where they think they can swing the vote to get those states. What is very interesting about these states is in most of them today, and this is my clue for you, it is not only the presidents that are running, there are governors and senators, and there are also votes on abortion, referenda. I don't know what the Mexican word is, where the public makes a vote on whether to actually have protections for abortion or not. This is very important in the swing states because some people will come and vote for a senator or vote for one of the other initiatives, and that will help the president at the top. So don't only look at Harris versus Trump. For example, in Pennsylvania, there is a Senate race. Senator Casey is the Democratic Senate candidate. He is doing very well. This helps Harris, for example. In Wisconsin, Tammy Baldwin is running for Senate. So my advice to you when you look at the swing states is don't only look at the top, look at below. And are there more people coming for one side or the other? That usually helps the candidate at the top. Whoever wins Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, maybe Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina is likely to win the election.
All right, Jeremy. So it is very close, and you're a serious analyst, and you will not say that one or the other candidate will win now because there are a lot of factors out there. But let's say we make a bet. And let's say you're going to put your own money. It will come out of your pocket. And we will make the bet today. Where would you put your money today? On Harris or on Trump?
Well, I think if the election were today, let's pretend the election were today, I'm quite sure Harris would win today. The question is, there are still 45 days. So it depends what kind of betting man you are. Are you the person who bets on the horse that's in the lead? Or do you not bet on the horse that's in the lead? So I bet on the horse that's in the lead. So I would put my money, I don't know, you want to do $100 or something? I will put...
I was talking more about 1,000. So, and why is that? Why do you think, why would you put your money on Kamala?
I put my money on Harris for two reasons. One, I think her enthusiasm is more. So there are a lot of people who like Trump, but there are a lot of people who voted for Trump before who are not, you know, they're not sure, they're not happy about it. Kamala has a lot of people who are very, very excited, and they are pushing very hard. That excitement matters. It reminds me of when Trump ran against Hillary Clinton, and there was so much more excitement for Trump. There was not the excitement for Hillary Clinton. So the excitement factor. And then the second reason is, so far, she has run a very disciplined campaign. You said this at the start. You were very smart. You said people thought that Kamala Harris was weak. I thought she was weak too, but she has actually been very good if you watch the debate, if you've watched her speeches. She's been very disciplined. She's run a very good campaign. And Trump is crazy, right? He's off his script. He has campaign managers. They say one thing, he says something else. And so I bet on the person who has more enthusiasm and the person who is following their plan more. But I do want to say, we don't know. And the thing about Donald Trump is he is so unpredictable. He could do something really bad and lose by more, or he could turn it around somehow. He's very dangerous as an opponent. So even though I'm betting on Harris, we should not assume that she will necessarily win.
All right, let's move now to the specific issues that are of interest to the index membership. How do these candidates, if they win, would look like? And let's start with China, the war with China, which has been a great opportunity for Mexican exports. Yes. What are the key differences between Harris and Trump approach to trade policy with China? And how do this difference may impact the US economy and the North American relationship? We all know that China is going to be the enemy for both. I think there is probably the only issue where Democrats and Republicans agree on is this.
Exactly.
But what can we expect? Are there any differences or will it be the same?
I think there are some very big differences, although we have to start by saying both the Democrats and Republicans see China as a threat. But Harris's approach is a much more mainstream approach. Her advisors are mainstream advisors. They believe that we have to be tough with China, but also cautious. That we have to put restrictions on Chinese dumping products in the US, sending electric cars at below market rate. But at the same time, we have to continue to have peaceful relations with China and work with them. More conversations, military to military, more conversations, State Department to Chinese Foreign Ministry, and they will still encourage businesses to work in China. Donald Trump, on the other hand, is much more personalist. He has a very negative view of China. He says racist things about China. But at the same time, he also likes Xi Jinping because he likes strong leaders. And so Trump's approach and the Chinese relationship with Trump would be very much about working with him personally, which will mean there will be a lot of inconsistency. If you are a friend of Trump in the US, you will do well with China. If you are not a friend of Trump, you won't. And so I would think there would be less consistency there. Trump will continue to say negative things about China, but he will also look for opportunities to build a relationship with Xi Jinping. Kamala Harris will rely on the institutions more. She will be more of what you are accustomed to, where things are handled by the State Department, by the Commerce Department and others. There will be more continuity from Biden to Harris, more uncertainty with Trump.
Let's move now to the USMCA. we have the review of the USMCA in 2026, but this will start really in 2025. The US law says that in October, the USTR has to launch that process. And in this process, the President of the United States has a key role. The agreement says that the heads of state have to sign, have to put in a written that they want to stay in the agreement. So either Harris or Trump will put their own seal into this process. So how the approach could be different for the review between them, and what can the impact be for us?
So I think we already have history that helps us here. We know what happened with NAFTA when Trump was president. That's why we're in this process now, right? Donald Trump believes, and there are a lot of people who believe this, that the United States should be tougher with Mexico, whatever that means. Tougher on immigration, tougher on businesses, protecting American jobs. That's what they think. So I think there's no doubt that Donald Trump as president would seek to put his name on the review and make the review change, to try to show at home that he was able to get a deal and change the review to be more favorable to the US, to more favorable on the American side, limiting some of your nearshoring, some of your exports to the US. I think Kamala Harris will not be easy, but I think she will value the relationship more. Again, her advisors will value the relationship more. She will look to actually do things in the review process that create more stability and are less about putting her name on it. She will want the review process to have no controversy. She will want to focus on other issues, and she will try to work with Sheinbaum, I think, with your new president, to try to get a set of workable relationships, particularly for the immigration issue, which is, of course, important for her. So I think you will see a tougher Trump administration on the USMCA, and I think more American-centered. Now, even if Harris wins, I think I'm very worried about the USMCA review because there will still be Republicans in Congress who are going to push this issue very much. I think there are two problems right now. The Republicans have spent a lot of time creating a sort of fear of Mexico in the US, and they will continue to use that, and it's very important that we push back against that. And second, I think they will try to make Harris look weak on this issue. They will try to say that she is weak. So my hope is that there can be close coordination between Harris and Sheinbaum from the beginning, and Trudeau in Canada, and so the issue can be kept out of the news. The more the issue is in the news in the United States, the worse it is, I think, for everyone.
So, lots of fireworks in the review if Trump wins?
Yes.
No fireworks in the review if Harris wins?
Fewer fireworks.
Fewer fireworks, because the Republicans in Congress will be putting some pressure.
Exactly.
To her. Interesting. Migration. Migration, there's a big difference in approach on migration on both camps. We saw that during the debate. What are those key differences between Trump's and Harris' approach on migration and on the border, and how this difference might affect not only migration, but also cross-border trade and ultimately the bilateral relationship?
Yeah, to me, this is one of the most frustrating issues because I live in Austin, Texas. Many of you know Austin, Texas, right? We could not grow. We're one of the fastest growing cities without more people from Mexico. Every day there are Mexicans. You have educated them, and then we hire them in Dell or Google. So you are helping us. You are paying for us to be rich in Austin, but yet people are anti-immigrant. It makes no sense to me. It is a contradiction. It shows a certain long-standing American xenophobia. And unfortunately, both candidates buy into that to some extent. Harris has to, because this has become a big issue in the US, so she wants to look tough on the border. You've noticed she keeps saying, I'm a prosecutor, and I will prosecute people at the border. So both candidates, I think, believe in trying to use more force at the border, more policing at the border, more closing the border. The difference is that Harris favors changes in the laws that would help people to become citizens once they are in the US. Both will try to keep people out, but Harris wants to create what the Democrats call a path to citizenship. Whereas Trump, I'm afraid even to recount what he says because it's so bad. His is to actually send people out of the country, to deport. I think 10 or 11 million people, which I will tell you cannot happen. It won't happen. But even the effort to do it. So the big change, the big difference, I think, is on what they do for those who are already in the country. The challenge for Harris, if she wins, though, is, again, if you want to have a new law to provide for more paths to citizenship, you have to get approval in Congress. This has been very hard. The last president to change the immigration law was Ronald Reagan. We have not changed our immigration law since 1986. So this is a very hard issue. In the short term, Harris would use, I think, less inhumane activities. She would not separate families. She will still use force. We all saw what Donald Trump did, separating families at the border, things of that sort.
Okay, and you know, in some sense, we can say we have some history of both.
Yes.
In the White House. Trump was president once, and this would be if he wins his second term, and Harris has been in the White House. So
precisely.
My question would be, on the Trump side, what would be different in the Trump from his first term? And on the Harris side, how different she would be from what we've seen from Biden?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think in his first term, Donald Trump had many people around him who were still mainstream. You think of Jim Mattis, you think of Rex Tillerson, who had run Exxon. He was a very standard person. So he had people around him who were still within the mainstream. Right now, the people around him are less in the mainstream. Now, I don't know. I have to be honest. Many of them are people I don't know, so it's hard to predict. This is the problem. They are people with less experience, people who are maybe more ideological, but we don't know what they would do. So I think if we're honest, we have to say on many of the issues, we don't know. It's the uncertainty, it's the risks, as the prior speaker was saying, that we don't know about. On the Harris side, I think actually there will be a lot of continuity with Biden. I think the Biden administration is very revealing of where she is. I think her changes would be 20%, 30%, but a lot of what we've seen with Biden, because she is in the mainstream of the Democratic Party. She is running as a candidate of change, but in fact, on many of these issues, China, the border, USMCA, I think it would look very much like the Biden administration. So in a certain way, the choice is what you know or what you don't know.
We focus a lot in this election on the presidency, but the Congress is pretty important for us. On trade, Congress is key, and Congress is key also on migration. So how relevant is the congressional election, and what will happen there?
Yeah, I think the congressional election for all of you is as important as the presidential election, because as you say, all of the things you care about have to go through Congress, and all of the things you care about, there will be members of Congress who will be very vocal and will put a lot of pressure on the president. I think we are likely to see a movement to the Democrats in the House of Representatives, because the Republicans have a very small majority, and many of their members are in districts like in New York, where they are likely to lose. So we're likely to see a change in the House, but the Senate could go the Republican way, because the Senate, they go up for election every 6 years, and it happens this time that there are more Democrats facing election, so more of them who could lose than Republicans. It is likely to be close in both houses. So the other thing that matters is how many of the extremes win and how many people closer to the center. I think it's very important from your perspective to pay close attention to these races and to build relationships with the members of Congress, because their offices, those are the ones that actually will have a lot of influence. I think we're likely to see a Democratic House of Representatives, a Senate that is maybe 50-50 or 51-49, and then a president who has to negotiate and make compromises with the members of the legislature. So that's I think, what we will see. And one other thing I will say is I think we will see, this is a good thing, I think we will see more influence for the Hispanic caucus in Congress. It is growing in number. And it used to be 10, 20 years ago, this was very small. As Sergio knows, this is growing. And I think that's a good sign. But that will not immediately translate into legislation, but I think that's a good sign of what we see happening.
Excellent. Let me ask a last question on my side, and let me give the opportunity for 2 questions in the audience, only 2, so at 12:10 you can be out there in the car and don't lose your flight. But just start thinking your questions, please. We'll take 2. So my last question is the following. So, you know, Biden and the Democrats have been very concentrated on migration. That has been their priority, and on labor. Labor is very important for them. But they have not paid a lot of attention to trade. On the other hand, Trump focused a lot on trade. So he will be more vigilant of the agreement that we care and its implementation. But Trump is fireworks, and it's uncertainty. What is better for us in the medium term? What is better for Mexico? A Trump president or a Harris president?
I think this one is very clear. I think a Harris president is better because, not because she's perfect. There are many things I disagree with her on, by the way. I don't think she's the best. But I think the less controversy around trade, the better. Right now, when trade is a political issue in the US, it encourages isolationism, it encourages xenophobia. It is better for there to be less talk about trade. And so it is to your advantage when, in a sense, you are doing this behind the scenes. I have yet, in the last 6 months, there has not been a single news show I have seen where trade was not used in a negative way in American politics against Mexico, right? So the less discussion, the less controversy around it, the better. And I think the more that trade is seen as continuity, what I think we want Americans to see is this is a working relationship on trade. Maybe we have problems on migration. That's a different issue. Trade works well. The components of my car have come from you. The tools at Home Depot have come from you. The price is low. And let's just allow this to continue. Because otherwise it becomes a firework. It becomes a political football, which is very difficult. And it's open then to people being very xenophobic, which is the problem.
Okay, excellent. So now is the opportunity for the audience. We have 2 questions. So if you have a question, raise your hand. We have one here. If we have a mic, please, and then we'll take one more.
Buenas. Buenas. ¿Me oigo bien? Mi nombre es Ernesto Mozo. My name is Ernesto Mozo.
Nice to meet you.
I already said the same thing. How you compare the president who is living in Mexico as a president, AMLO, with the incumbent president of the United States, in this case, maybe Trump or maybe Harris? And when I say how you compare, I'm trying to say attitude regarding the way things should be done in respect for the law.
Oh, okay. I have opinions, but I will say I am not an expert on AMLO. I have read and studied AMLO, your president, but I'm not an expert. You're the expert. And Americans should not tell people in another country what to think. We do that too often. But I will say that to me, as a believer in the rule of law, and the prior speaker was talking about this, the changes in your judicial system are very dangerous. And this is something that would not be accepted in the US. We have problems with our judicial system, but we believe the judicial system has to be independent of politics. So I don't like some of the decisions the Supreme Court has made, but I don't want to elect them. It should not be a popularity contest who is on the Supreme Court. It should be an election for the Senate, for the House, for the President. And to me, as a historian, it is very dangerous when any leader on the left or the right tries to say they want to control the judges. Because if you control the judges, then you can change all the laws without election. And so that to me is a big difference. It doesn't mean that the American leaders believe in the rule of law more, but it means they are more constrained. They are more constrained. This is a worry for me about your system. I also think it is a very strange thing that AMLO, after the election, has a new legislature and can still do all these things before the new president takes over. This also seems, so those are two things that I think are problematic from a comparative point of view with the United States.
Thank you so much. And the last question, please, we have a hand over there. Go ahead, if we can have a mic. It's coming. Is that Rene? Yeah, Rene, Chihuahua.
Hi, good afternoon again.
Hello, nice to see you.
Thank you for the explanation. We talk about counter forces or counterweights in the power. And in North America, we still to have that strong hand that hits the table to provoke that on our system. Because also it's not a benefit that Mexico goes in one direction opposite to what Canada and the US is doing, or are doing, I'm sorry. How can Washington, we know that under a Republican government, that hand is going to be stronger. From a democratic perspective, do we expect Washington to continue being that hand strongly hitting the table and trying to put order in the neighborhood? Because some of the decisions that we've talked that we're going through as a country, it's really going to be a conflict of interest with USMCA and the big corporations. Yes. And that will put at risk our continuous development as a country.
Yeah, it is an excellent question. And again, I'm a historian, so I have to agree with a very intelligent point that he made, which is that the United States tends to act as a bully. It's not good, but we are able to act as a bully, and we don't even see it when we're doing it, right? I think it's Porfirio Diaz, right, who says, "Poor Mexico," right? So far from God, so close to the United States, right? And it's and I think I understand that, right? It's a very big problem that will not change because that's built into American culture, unfortunately, right? But I think what has worked to make that heavy hand a little less heavy and a little more of a hand to reach out rather than a hand down is when you have a relationship between the leaders. And I am optimistic, but I'm optimistic more from hope than from evidence that you could have a productive relationship between Harris and Sheinbaum. I think there are reasons to believe that. First of all, they both have a connection in California. And we all know from business, right, that a personal connection matters, right? I think Harris will respect her because she will see Sheinbaum not only as a woman president, but as someone who has an education, someone who's serious, someone who's a little bit of a technocrat, someone who has been a mayor. And I think if Sheinbaum has good skills, she will reach out to Harris. And if you can build trust, if you can build a relationship there, it still doesn't take away the problem, but it can make things a little easier. And then if you have Harris and Sheinbaum having a good relationship, then members of Congress and others see that. So if I were advising the Mexican government and advising Index, I would say really try to put an effort into building this relationship with the new administration, because that is the only way to deal with this problem, I think.
Thank you so much, Jeremy, for this. We should say thank you to our guests with a big round of applause, please. And thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Agradecemos a nuestros panelistas su participación. Enrique Morán, presidente de Index Nuevo Laredo, les hace entrega de un reconocimiento a nombre del Consejo Nacional. El aplauso de ustedes lo complementa.
A mí me tocó a mí.